So last time, we watched Craig fall in love with a fictional woman, write her love letters, and then rage quit a campaign because she started dating someone else's character. You'd think that would be rock bottom. You'd think Craig would take a step back, maybe do some self-reflection, perhaps even wild idea, separate fiction from reality. Instead, Craig decided to become a game master. And somehow it got worse. After Craig left the Anima campaign, he didn't stay away from the group for long. He came back with a pitch. He wanted to run his own game. The system, Exalted 2nd Edition by White Wolf. Now, if you haven't heard of Exalted, imagine Chinese mythology got into a bar fight with Greek mythology, and then someone threw in laser raptors for good measure. It's this absolutely wild, over-the-top power fantasy where player characters are basically demigods. Sounds amazing, right? Craig certainly sold it that way. He painted this picture of epic battles, godlike powers, and a world so rich you'd drown in the lore. And credit where it's due, the pitch was good. The group was genuinely excited. Jacob, Jake, and the original poster all signed up. 4 friends ready for a new adventure. What could go wrong? Everything could go wrong. Before they even started playing, Craig laid down a rule that should have had everyone running for the exits. No one was allowed to read the rule books. Let me say that again. The game master told his players they were not permitted to learn the rules of the game they were about to play. That's like a chef saying, "I'll cook you a 5-course meal, but you're not allowed to see the menu, know the ingredients, or ask what you're eating. Just trust me." And look, some people might be into that level of surprise, but in a tabletop RPG where player agency is literally the entire point, that's not mystery, that's a power trip. Craig allowed them to see choice parts, basic character creation, and a few snippets of game mechanics. Everything else, his eyes only, his world, his rules, his secrets. On top of that, he capped all their characters hard, no attribute or skill above 3 out of a maximum of 5, and almost no supernatural powers, in a game called Exalted, a game that is fundamentally about being supernatural. That's like buying tickets to a superhero movie and being told, actually nobody has powers in this one, they're all just regular accountants. Thanks, Craig, very cool. So the players rolled their characters within Craig's very strict limitations. Jake made Taya, a savage huntress from the southeastern reaches of creation. Tough, resourceful, cool concept. Jacob started with a blind old hag who had an owl familiar, which is honestly an incredible character idea, but eventually switched to Geist, a well-spoken sorcerer's apprentice, more versatile for the campaign Craig was running. And then there was Zediel, the original poster's character, a nobleman from a family that secretly worshipped a demonic entity. He'd made a dark pact with the murder demon lurking in his family's basement, killed his entire household, and travelled with Raga, a panther familiar that could shapeshift into an equally dangerous woman. Okay, that's actually a sick character concept. A fallen noble with a demon cat/femme fatale familiar. That's the kind of edgy that actually works because it's baked into the story, not just, I have a dark past with no follow-through. The campaign opened with all the characters waking up in a camp, surrounded by cannibals. Classic GM move, right? Immediate danger forces the party together, sets the tone. Good stuff. Except Craig had absolutely no idea how to run the combat system. He spent an entire hour, a full 60 minutes, flipping through the rule book mid-session while his players sat there, waiting. Remember, these are the same rule books he told them they couldn't read. So let me get this straight. The players aren't allowed to know the rules because of immersion, but the GM doesn't know them either. That's not immersion, Craig, that's just incompetence with extra steps. A few sessions in, the group encountered an NPC named Kara, a runaway princess. And if you've been paying attention to part 1, you already know what's coming when Craig introduces a female NPC. But this time it wasn't about romance, it was about power. Kara was superior to every player character in every possible way. Combat, way beyond their capped at 3 stats. Charisma, off the charts. Importance to the plot, she basically was the plot. She walked in and immediately started ordering the party around on her incredibly vague quest. No clear goal, no real motivation the players could latch onto, just, help me because I'm important. Ah yes, the classic GM self-insert disguised as a quest giver. This NPC is better than all of you, does everything you can't, and you should feel lucky she lets you tag along. We've all seen this. It never works. It always feels bad. Now here's where Craig's GM style went from bad to genuinely unfair. Exalted has this core concept called exaltation, a transformative moment where your character awakens to godlike power. It's supposed to be dramatic, personal, a pivotal story beat. Craig threw all of that in the trash. Instead of letting exaltation happen naturally through roleplay, Craig drip-fed powers to players between sessions in private mini-sessions, one charm at a time, of his choosing. The players had zero say in their own character progression. Imagine playing D&D and instead of choosing your spells when you level up, your GM picks them for you in a private phone call. Congratulations, you've learned prestidigitation, again, for the third time, you're welcome. But it gets worse, because the drip wasn't even equal. Jake got next to nothing. His huntress was basically left to rot while the other characters grew in power. No mini-sessions, no new abilities, no love from the GM. Jacob, he had a job and a life, so he couldn't always make the mini-session schedule Craig demanded, so he fell behind too. And Zediel, oh Zediel got the royal treatment. Craig courted the original poster with constant invitations to mini-sessions, power after power, exclusive information that the other players never received. Zediel was growing into a demigod while his teammates were still stuck at slightly competent mortal. And here's the thing that really twists the knife, it wasn't random. Craig chose this. He actively decided that one player's character should be the star, and the others should be supporting cast in someone else's story. Sound familiar? Because we just watched Craig throw a fit when the previous GM didn't make him the main character. At some point, the campaign stopped being a group adventure and became the Zediel show, directed by Craig. Craig started giving Zediel exclusive information, plot hooks, lore dumps, secret meetings that the other players never even knew about. The story increasingly revolved around Zediel's demonic heritage, his mysterious bloodline, and his special destiny. And then the women started showing up. Craig threw female NPCs at Zediel's feet like he was decorating a throne room, awkwardly sexualized encounters that nobody asked for. At one point, and I genuinely wish I was making this up, Craig introduced an underage girl and required Zediel to make a temperance roll. There is no version of this that is okay. None, zero. This isn't edgy storytelling. This isn't exploring dark themes. This is a GM putting a minor in a sexual context and making a player roll dice to see if their character resists. That's not a game mechanic. That's a red flag the size of a football field. Craig even told the original poster privately that Zediel was more important than the other player characters. He said that, out loud, to one player, about the other players' characters. Imagine being Jake, showing up every week, getting nothing, watching Zediel collect powers and plot hooks and NPC girlfriends like Pokémon, and having no idea that the GM has literally declared you a side character in his own private conversation with someone else. Remember Raga, Zediel's panther familiar that could turn into a woman? Well, during what was supposed to be a dramatic boss battle, the kind of fight where every player gets their moment to shine, Raga ended it. In one attack. One single attack. The familiar, not even a player character, soloed the boss while the actual players watched. That's not a boss fight. That's a cutscene. You know those moments in video games where you put down the controller because the game is playing itself? That's what Craig turned his campaign into, except the other players couldn't even enjoy the graphics. With Zediel as the undisputed protagonist and everyone else as background decoration, the campaign started falling apart at the seams. There was no overarching plot, things just happened, random, disconnected events that Craig seemed to improvise on the spot. Geist's master sent him on a quest to find Panties, that was the actual quest, a sorcerer's apprentice searching for undergarments, high fantasy everyone. Zediel's temperance failures somehow produced a sidereal exalt, which, if you know exalted lore, makes absolutely no sense. It's like saying your D&D character sneezed and accidentally created a new god. A water nymph showed up, had some kind of encounter, and produced an instant, fully grown adult son. No pregnancy, no time skip, just boom, here's your adult child, congratulations. This campaign wasn't a story. It was Craig's fever dream with dice rolling in the background. Every session was just whatever Craig thought was cool that week, with zero regard for continuity, player investment, or basic narrative structure. Jake checked out first, and honestly, it took longer than anyone would have expected. After weeks of being ignored, underpowered, and irrelevant to the plot, he just stopped caring, stopped engaging, stopped showing up regularly. And that's the saddest kind of player loss. Not a dramatic blow-up, not a fight, just someone quietly realizing that their time and creativity don't matter in this game, so why bother? The campaign never officially ended. Craig just found a new system to obsess over, because of course he did, and put Exalted on permanent ice. But before it faded completely, Craig shared his grand endgame plan with the original poster, the big finale he'd been building toward this whole time. Raga, Zediel's familiar, would return as a demon queen wielding the Sword of Creation, the single most powerful artifact in the entire setting, and it would be up to Zediel and Zediel alone to stop her, or redeem her. Not the party, not the group, Zediel, alone. The finale of a multiplayer game was designed for one player. The other characters weren't even part of the ending, they were never going to be. So that's Craig as a game master, obfuscating rules to maintain control, playing favorites so blatantly that it drove a player away, removing agency, killing tension, and building an entire campaign around one character while the others watched from the sidelines. And somehow, Craig never saw a problem with any of it. In his mind, he was running an epic, cinematic experience. But this isn't the end of the Craig saga, not even close, because Craig had one more campaign in him, one more chance to prove he'd learned absolutely nothing. And that's the one that burned it all down. Part 3 coming soon, and it's going to be ugly.